Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and attention. Once again, thank you for the feedback. That keeps me going, especially when I run too long and I go so long that there's no questions. So I kind of rely on your email. I'm going to do my best to stop that habit of like trying to cover too much. I'm actually flattered. I didn't expect this. We've titled these 4 sessions "A Personal Journey of Connections," and I'm saying I'm kind of going out on a limb, sharing my personal kind of life or my connection, my personal connection with Toi Sensei. And I would never do it and haven't done it all these years in class because, like, why would I take up teaching time when we're supposed to be, practicing and learning and getting experiences in class? So I wouldn't take the time to do this, but you're giving me permission and you're showing me with your interest that you are, really interested. So I'm going to continue. The bulk of the mail this time was interest in the person. Last time we took a fairly deep dive so I could give you many examples of these epigrams in Saikontan. And I would link it to Toi Sensei's mission and his Tenshoku and his life as a teacher and a mentor and his desire to apply these universal principles that were first outlined in Saikontan in daily life. I mean, that was his mission. So I won't do the cab ride to figure out how we got from here since all these are recorded. People can always go and hear the previous sessions and realize where we are, which was, I've been kind of following this personal story chronologically. And last time we got ourselves up to 1992. And I said that was kind of a cap year of 5 years of Kyatsu training that Toi Sensei was giving me. And that occasioned an opportunity for me to spend a lot of time with him, especially pretty much the full summers of 91 and 92, just after our new headquarters opened, which was in 1990 in Tochigi, what we then called Kinosato, homeland of Ki, basically. And one thing I forgot to tell you, but it's really relevant to Saikontan. As I look around, there are maybe very few people who were, look around in here in the people who are attending today, there are a few people who attended the opening, the grand opening in 1990. And you might remember that there was, Tohei Sensei built what was called a Ki Museum. It doesn't exist anymore. It was on land that the family has since sold. But it was a beautiful museum and a lot of resources. It was like first class. And one of the rooms in the museum were tall, full-size models, all dressed out, of these sages. And guess the sages from? Saikontan. So there was Mencius, Confucius, Lao Tzu. And so Toi Sensei himself was giving credit to these persons who understood Ki, and yet the gift that Toi Sensei gave us is he wanted to learn not just how to say it. Remember, 17 years old, pleurisy, in bed, and he's reading Saikontan with such a passion that he memorized it. And as I said last time, that was like, okay, his life mission was, you know what, when I'm here reading this book, I have this palpable feeling of just this connection to the Ki of the universe. But I don't know exactly how I don't know how it's happening, but I believe that he was experiencing this connection, as I said last time, before he had a vocabulary to even understand what it was. So that's pretty interesting. Just as a quick summary of Saikontan, remember gratitude. Why? Because if you're alive, if you can feel your heart beating, if you can take a breath, then that's something. And later on, Toi Sensei would build from that. That's like a 1, the manure worm 1, that can become a cicada. So 1 and 9, that's each kukai. So all these tentacles are kind of collapsing into Saikontan. The other thing is that training Shugyo is a lifetime process. From the Confucian Analects, I shared with you the notion of going from a junsu, which is usually translated as a superior person or a gentleman, to a shensu, a sage. And the hallmark passage from the Analects was, at 15, I set my heart on learning. At 30, at 40, 50, 60, and at 70, I followed my heart's content without overstepping the line. That was the Li. The patterns, like when, that we talked about before, of ritual propriety. Okay, so mostly it's all about simplicity. And I was thinking this week, you know, sometimes when I've given public speeches, I jokingly have said, you know, everyone, I've written a diet book. And they go, really, sensei? Or they won't call me sensei if it's a business thing. They say, oh, really, you wrote a book? I said, well, yeah, but it's only 4 words. And I said, if you go to the section in Barnes and Noble, right, the big section is the diet section. I mean, people are making lots of money on this, writing books about dieting and losing weight. And I tell people, oh yeah, I wrote a book, but it's very simple. Think Saikontan for us. I say, yeah, it's only 4 words. And they go, what? I go, yeah, here's the book. Eat less, exercise more. It's like, everybody knows it's true, right? It's a universal principle. Everybody says yes. Does that make sense? Yes. Eat less, exercise more. End of story. Or another one is investing. Okay, how about this one? Buy low, sell high. Simple, simple, simple. How about running a sustainable business? Profit is revenue less cost. If you don't have revenue, like is happening around the world right now with businesses, and you have fixed costs, your cash flow is in trouble, right? And so many businesses are in trouble, unfortunately, because people are sitting at home rather than spending money, understandably. So these are simple things that we can say, like almost like a Saikontanism. We can say it, but how do we do it? And so Toi Sensei emphasized, you know what? And what Saikontan emphasizes, it's about developing self-control. Self-control. So in one of the last classes that Rich was leading on Otomo, he mentioned our work at the Citadel. And we start out and we say, you know, you're being trained to be a leader, but you can't lead others unless you can learn to lead yourself first. In other words, if you can't exercise self-control, then you can't possibly lead by example. Another example of the same thing, since you were asking about these vignettes and how they're tied to Toi Sensei's life, I was with him once when he was giving a public talk to educators in Japan. I was otomoing for him. And in this talk to educators, he was telling the teachers, if you can't control your emotions and build a strong, purposeful mind yourself, how do you expect to teach that to the students if you can't emulate that example? If you're a teacher who loses control, loses patience, who obviously doesn't feel comfortable or at home in the classroom, Nathan, I'm seeing you there thinking, you know, it's true, right? It's like you have to lead by example. So Toi Sensei would say, you know, how can you be a teacher if you can't exercise self-control yourself? Another one of my favorite examples of the same point, you know, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time with Toi Sensei learning and teaching Kyatsuho, him teaching me Kyatsuho. And this is out of the chronology, but very quickly. In 2004, I was able to write a grant. And I've always wanted to go back and study a little bit or become familiar with traditional Chinese medicine. So in November, December of 2004, I first went to Beijing, then I went to Hong Kong, then I went to Taipei. Won't take the time to tell you why or how or with whom. But when I was at Hong Kong, one of my places that I stayed and mirrored or followed the physicians there at the medical school, I had a meeting with the director after spending a couple of days there. And I said, you know, traditional Chinese medicine works on the principle of harmonizing your qi or qi, like yin and yang. And when you're ill, there's an imbalance. And acupuncture, maxubustion, herbal medicine is all designed to bring you back into balance. So I asked the director, I said, how do your medical students practice wellness themselves? Like, what kind of discipline and training do they do for themselves since they're leading others? And his body language was like this. I asked the question and he goes, and I went, oh, I hit a nerve. He said, we don't. And it was as if I punched him in the gut. And I said, oh, well, that's kind of interesting, because he realized they needed to do something, that here they were trying to teach other people wellness, but they had no process for the physicians themselves maintaining their health. So you know what he did? Oh, so what I did, I said, well, give me 45 minutes. I taught him the 4 basic principles, just like you would do in a public seminar. And he was like, whoa. Like, this is what it means to utilize your whole iceberg, the top half and the bottom half. You know what he did? He said, can you come back here and teach the rest of us, like, right away? I said, well, I'm scheduled to go to Taipei, and then I'm going home for Christmas. Like, I was spending Thanksgiving in Beijing with my friend Roger Ames. And I said, so it would have to be really quick and right after Christmas, because I have to get back and teach at Furman. He said, okay, that'd be great. So I go from, you know, the US to Beijing to Hong Kong to Taipei and go home for Christmas and then fly all the way back to Hong Kong and do this for the medical school. And then, anyway, it's an interesting story. Toy Sensei loved that one. Like, you're teaching people how to be balanced, but you're not doing anything for yourself. Okay, let's go back to the chronology here. And I'll take you up to a kind of a really momentous event that really inspired me. So since I've been following the chronology, in 1993, well, I met my wife in the same year. We got married. That was a big deal. Also in 93, we hosted the National Chief Instructors Conference here in Greenville. And we added, oh, here's a correction I wanted to make. On the front end of that, we did a law enforcement seminar. So we had worked with the state academy and the Greenville police, sheriff, state police, whatever, the whole law enforcement organization that provided credit to law enforcement officers for attending certain things. And we became an accredited event and did that. But that reminded me to tell you that all of the Las Vegas training that we did, that was actually after. I was lumping that together when I said last time, Toy Sensei said, you know, you have this fighting mind, and I was doing all this work with security and law enforcement, but that was pre-Las Vegas. So I was just setting the record there. That was like 94, 95, 96. When we would go Aikido-wise during the 90s, it was all preparing for the Taigi competition. So that's what we did, and 96 was the first international Taigi competition, continued to train Taigis through the 90s. 2000 was the second every 4 years, and then again in 2004. Started going to Russia, Igor, I see you there, in 1999, so that was over 20 years ago. And I was going to Japan actually with Shigenori Nagatomo, my friend. We ended up translating another book called Religion and Humanity for a Global Society that came out, I think, 2001. And I was going to Japan working on that regularly in terms of my academic life. So again, I was able to stay in contact with Toy Sensei and Tamura Sensei. And the discussion of Saikontan continued. Remember, I showed you the epigrams last time that were kind of like the causal seeds of many of the shokushu. So Toy Sensei and I, you know, this is what we talked about. All right, so on March 2nd, 2003, through his assistant, international assistant. Her name was Maki Sato. Toi Sensei writes to me. And he says, we're about ready to run out of the shokushu, like just printing. We need to print more. And he had been thinking for a long time that the shokushu needed to be improved. And so he said, I have asked one of my students who was at the Tohei Gakuen at headquarters at the time, who was bilingual. He was an English native speaker, but he was also completely fluent in Japanese. And he asked him to take a shot at retranslating it. And he did. And it was a lot of change. As Toi Sensei said, it's about 40% changed. But he wanted me to check it. So he sends this to me. And I'm looking at it, and I kind of am thinking, you know, it's better. But in terms of all that we've talked about with Saikontan and Shokushu, I knew that why is he sending me this letter? There was a deeper reason. So I took it seriously, and I wrote him an 11-page, I have it here. I saved all this correspondence from that whole period. And I wrote like an 11-page response talking about how still there were opportunities to make it better. And I introduced the notion of rhythm. You know, Saikontan has a rhythm. Remember, I can't remember if it was in the first one or the second. I think it was the first one. I said there's this concept called when, meaning patterns. Patterns of the universe, patterns of civil life, individual patterns in their lifetimes and habit formations. And in the Chinese tradition, Chinese literature tradition, these patterns were believed to be picked up by the intelligentsia, a person of letters. Oh, and here's a tidbit that I didn't tell you before. Toi Sensei's great-grandfather was the principal of a Chinese literature school. So this concept of going back to the classics, remember I said Toi Sensei was like a bunjin. He would recite all these classics. Toi Sensei wrote his own poetry, very much along the rhythms of Saikontan. So one thing I knew is that many years ago, in Aikikai style, when you'd line up, the head person, not the sensei bowing in at the shomen, but the head person would be the one who would signal, like that person should read the key of the sensei bowing in. And when you feel their key movement, they would say, rei. And that was an indication for everyone to bow together. So the whole class would have good rhythm. That was a tradition in Aikikai forever. Well, Toi Sensei changed that, and here's why. He said, you know what, why should only the senior person be really focused on me and extending ki and moving on the I of Ima when my ki moves? So Toi Sensei always said, move when my ki moves, not when my body moves. He wanted everyone to be that focused. So we did away with this rei, and everyone was to really empty themselves, focus on the teacher, and bow when the teacher bowed together, like a silent rhythm. And then how many of you have been in a class where someone reads the shokushu and their rhythm is really not very good? They read too long and then it's hard for people to follow, or they read too short. And what happens is the class chemistry is not really very good because we're not actually reading together and moving together, which is what we're supposed to be learning in class. So why don't we use the reading of the shokushu and the bowing in as a vehicle to work on all these things? And I knew all that. And so I knew that the shokushu would be really improved if we came out with another edition and we put like diacritical marks and actually did the spacing to show the rhythm. So when the student is up there reading, they can do it very clearly. Well, Toi Sensei, basically he said, would you please come to Japan? And I said, I'm willing to come to Japan. Let's talk about this. This is really, really important. That is the shokushu. If we're going to redo it, this is the essence, the core of the teaching. And he knew I was personally invested in this just because of our whole relationship. So I go, and this is going to amaze you. Toi Sensei has a total beginner's mind. So think about just a couple of tidbits here. He was the chief instructor of Aikikai for over 20 years before he left and formally formed the Ki Society in 1974. So think of it, he's 54 years old. He's starting over. So what does he do? Well, he develops, or he'd already developed Ki tests, but now he can make that a part of the curriculum. Ki testing, Ki rank, in addition to Aikido rank. And then he's going to systematize the Hitoriwaza. He's going to systematize 5th Q, 4th Q, 3rd Q, all with a certain logic in terms of progression of how the learning should progress. And then he invents things like the 3-minute exercise, but he's got no problem throwing it completely out the door, which he did when he invented something else called oneness rhythm exercise, which was superior. So he's basically throwing it away if he's finding something new. This is like his innovative nature to constantly improve what? The how. How do you do it? We can talk about how to say it, but 3-minute exercise, oneness taiso, hitori waza, weapons work, all of that are mechanisms to learn. How about taigis? Why are they timed? So that we can, Toi Sensei felt that he is palpably feeling this connection to the Ki of the universe, and he wants to share that with us. So many of these principles are trying to him to say, how can I help my students experience the world as I do? I know it's not mystic, I know I'm logical, and I can do this. By the way, why do you suppose when we added that last shokushu that was added on this revision thing that I'm telling you about, why is it called the treasure of Ki testing? Right out of Saikontan. The treasure is, in Saikontan, I think I read you, don't be a beggar at the gate thinking that, you're poor, because you have infinite potential if you just walk through the gate, which means to train yourself to go from a 1 to a 9. So here's what blew my mind. We spent 4 days together, March 20, 21, 22, 23. And you know what? What people don't, very few people know that this event even occurred, because he said, please keep it confidential, which I did. But guess what? We didn't look at the Japanese ever. We started with a blank sheet of paper because we've been talking about this for 27 years. So it's like, okay, motto, what do you really want to communicate? One by one, 4 days of nothing but how to communicate this as best we can. Long story made short, it's Sunday, the 23rd. We say, okay, we've got it. Maki Sato is constantly back at the computer doing new drafts. We finish, and the greatest compliment that Toi Sensei ever told me, he said, you know what? I think this version that we have here now in English is better than anything, including the Japanese. I think I'm going to have to go redo the Japanese to better reflect this translation that we just did. I mean, that blew my mind. And I'm not saying that to gain credit. I'm saying this is part of a personal journey. Because what happened was Toi Sensei, short version, Toi Sensei sent it out to various chief instructors. I didn't know who. I know a couple. And guess what? The feedback was, wow, this is really great, but boy, is this different. And there are concepts here and terms that we don't know what it is. And it was those same very concepts that people were like, whoa, we don't know what this is, that Toi Sensei and I added, because we weren't going from the original Japanese. We were going from like the understanding from Saikontan and 27 years of conversation about this. So other words, in fact, we wrote 3 new ones that never, went into it. One was on Kigatsuku, this kind of aha moment when you can experience it for yourself, when you're kind of presencing that first order experience. Another was on relative thinking and absolute thinking. Another one was on Keiko and Shukyo. I tell you all that to say I was totally inspired. And I left on that Sunday. As I always do, I went to Tamura Sensei's house to pay my respects and to visit with him before I left. That was March 23rd. I flew back on the 24th. And on April 4th, Tamura Sensei passed away. On April 6th, I was back in Japan. At the funeral service, Toi Sensei comes with Senmu and Shinichi Sensei, and he's like looking at me like, whoa, you're back, you're here? And we had a few words we always exchanged of Saikontanisms. And that was just an incredible, intense, moving period for me. But what it did is it told me, it gave me the confidence, you know what, I'm gonna write, I have spent my life up to that point trying to apply key principles in many different venues. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write my own version based on my experience of key in daily life. And this time I'm gonna add exercises, which turned into living with the wind at your back. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about those exercises next week. I'm just gonna tee up this and give you the background that says, you know, who was I to think I should be writing a book like A Key in Daily Life based on my experience? But I figured this is a win-win. I'm gonna write this book, which I did. It's now, you know, it's over 400 pages. It's a typeset. And I thought, this is a win-win because I'm gonna, with Toi Sensei's blessing now, I'm gonna write the book. And then in the fall of 2004, right? I wrote it between 2003, 2004, and I presented it to him when we were having our training that year in the fall. I presented it to Shinichi Sensei. By the way, Shinichi Sensei, for most of those sessions there in March, he was sitting at the same table because at that time, he was there, he said, to help learn English. So he could spend, you know, 3 days talking about English and the shokushu. So, where was I with that? Okay, so basically I'm setting this up, and the win-win is I'm gonna hand him this manuscript and then wait, because it's really long, and he'll either correct me and think, okay, I went through this book, what were you thinking? This is totally crazy and wrong, in which case that's good. I'll be corrected and I'll know better. Or he'll say, yeah, this is good. Go ahead, publish it. And fortunately, I got the latter. So to tee this up, Rich, could you show, I'm going to show you some connections to Saikontan, and then I'm going to show you the book trailer with some kind of instructions. I showed you this last week. This was the one that was the inspiration, well, not inspiration, we linked it to Ichikukai. Manure worms are dirty, okay, that's a 1, yet they transform themselves into cicadas, that's a 9, which drink the dew in the autumn wind. Decayed grasses are not bright, that's a 1, and yet they give birth to glowworms whose luster matches the summer moon, that's a 9. Hence we know that cleanliness often comes from filth and brilliance from gloom. That's the idea that I had in mind, and Toi Sensei had in mind when he talks about it. Everyone who picks up a book, Key in Daily Life, whatever, or walks in the dojo, if they're living and breathing, you can say they have a 1. And with training and learning to unify your mind and body and be the best you can be, the sky's the limit. So one more Saikontan as a lead into this. One more Saikontan epigram that you haven't seen before. And this might blow your mind, actually. Why? Because most people, you know, not most people, we all know, if you study Toi Sensei and his history, that he credits Nakamura Tenpu Sensei for teaching him mind leads body. But guess what? It's also right here in Saikontan, believe it or not. Life's fortune and misfortune are caused entirely by the mind. Shakyamuni said, Shakyamuni, by the way, is the historical Buddha, the living person Buddha. A burning desire for gain is a pit of fire, and an indulgence in greed is a sea of suffering. Okay, that's relative thinking. That's second and third order body-mind awareness. So you can see that. That's like dust, shadows, clouds, okay? Intense desire for gain, greed, not good. Once our mind is purified, a flame is turned into a pool. And once our mind awakens us from a dream of worldliness, relative thinking, our ship of life is anchored along the shore of the great beyond. First order body-mind awareness. Hence, a slight change of mind can suddenly make a different situation. Should we not be careful? So just think about what happens when you think up here, key test, not so good. Change your mind, keep 1 point, key test, completely different experience. So that's the idea of applying key in daily life. The idea is moving from this transition from third order to second order to first order, if you want to use that template, but it's one that Toi Sensei and I talked about all the time. All right, here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to show you a 4.5 minute book trailer. The reason why I'm doing this is two things. I want you to really listen to the script. The script is right out of Saikontan. And not to my, I mean, I did write the script, but the people who put this together, I think did a marvelous job. You know, Saikontan, as I said, are these word pictures. And I think they did a wonderful job at creating images that go along with the script that can almost give you a palpable feeling. And so what I want to do is Living with the Wind at Your Back itself, the title is like a Saikontanism. It's a word picture. You know, it makes you think, oh, living with the wind at your back, like there's something in nature there moving me forward. So even the title is indebted to this kind of thing that the Toi Sensei and I shared, and it's very much influenced everything that I probably think, do, or say. So with that said, Rich, can you roll that video, please? And hopefully we won't have any technical problems.
Imagine what your life would be like if each day you felt as though the entire universe was working with you as a steady, powerful, and uplifting ally. Do you think this kind of life is actually possible? Well, it is possible. And understanding how to live this way is as simple as it is profound. The universe has a rhythm, and when you learn to think and act in accord with that rhythm, you begin to live as though your sail is always full. You are living with the wind at your back. Our experience of life is shared. We see, hear, taste, touch, feel, and think about a world that we have in common. However, how we react to the world around us can lead us down two paths. We can either interpret ourselves as being alone, not good enough, or a victim of our circumstances, or we can learn how to be connected and choose to be a positive, empowered individual possessing the tools to live our life in accord with our highest values and aspirations. In my new book, Living with the Wind at Your Back, I describe 7 arts to positively transform your life. The 7 arts include the art of preparation, the art of compassion, the art of responsibility, the art of relaxation, the art of conscious action, the art of living naturally, and the art of service. While the 7 arts exercises will serve as your toolkit, it is your own personal experience that will serve as both beacon and benchmark, helping you to make steady progress towards your goals. The 7 arts change process enables you to navigate the ups and downs of your daily life because you will be living in complete harmony with the principles of the universe. I tell stories in this book, drawing from my own eclectic path as a ski racer, a student of the martial art of Ki Aikido, a professor of Asian studies and philosophy, and as a performance development consultant, helping to improve the performance of Fortune 500 businesses as well as professional athletes and musicians. Throughout my journey, I was asking simple questions and then learning to discover answers by actually testing them. I was looking for universal principles that are practical and work when applied against the test of my own daily life experience. You have to put your answers to the test to see if they really work by applying them at home, at work, and at play. Let's keep it simple. It's possible to go on a personal development retreat for a few days to better yourself, but it is a temporary relief away from the real challenges of your daily life. Lasting change requires a toolkit for daily life, not retreat life. The 7 Arts provides the tools of patience and discipline, cultivated drop by drop in the midst of our real life challenges. All that is necessary is for you to put yourself in the right rhythm and relationship with the universe that supports your very existence at every single moment. The truth is, the universe always is and has always been at your back. You are never truly separate and alone. At every precious moment, your life is sustained by your deep connection to the single unifying force of the universe. The good news is that you can experience this connection for yourself. Practicing the 7 Arts will enable you to function and live in accord with the rhythm of the universe. This is living with the wind at your back. I wish you well on your journey of positive self-transformation.
So, Rich, can we do the last 2 slides? Next week, I'm going to cover the 14 exercises because, why? Toi Sensei said you have to be able to do it, not just say it. So when I wrote this book, I wrote it thinking, if I can do it, you can do it. It's an invitation for other people to practice the exercises, live with the wind at your back, and then write your own book, your own life, your own story, using the principles of mind and body coordination for you to live the life of your dreams. So the last exercise, I'm just going to give you a feel here. So let me just read. The final step is to put into action a life of service. So the last art is the art of service. You know, serving others, having a mission, a tenshoku, that's not about just yourself, but about making the world better. That's when Toi Sensei thinks of a tenshoku, it's a mission that's for everybody. So by noticing and connecting with others, you've cultivated the ability to put service ahead of all other daily life activities. By focusing upon helping others, you are truly living with the wind at your back. And then the next slide. So this is just the conclusion of a 400-page book. I'm just saying where it's going to go to. So please simply make an extra effort to believe in yourself and stick to the positive journey of your personal transformation. The book assumes you come to the book and you have the power of one. And the idea is, I'll give you all kinds of explanations that hopefully might be motivational of how I've applied key principles in my life. But the whole idea is not to say, be like me, it's to ask invitational questions. There are 110 questions throughout the book where I say, have you ever wondered X? And then I talk about, I've wondered that, and here's how I was thinking about it. But the question is how would you answer that? How can you use these principles and these exercises in daily life that I'll describe next week to help you reach your goals? Because you don't necessarily have to go in the dojo. As Toi Sensei said, I'll teach ki, even give ki rank, as he did when he started out, well, and we still do, that some people just are not interested in the martial art part. So the idea is, here I hope is a motivational book about ki in daily life that basically says, if I can do it, you can do it. And so here it is, to discover and fulfill your higher calling, your true mission in the service of others, is the reason that now the breath of life is within you. You're a one. If you're reading now and the breath of life is strong within you, right, then do not doubt and do not despair. Practice the daily exercises for arts 1 through 6 and apply them, the seventh art, in your daily life 24 hours a day. That's Shugyo. In this way, you will turn a monastery of your life in the making into a life that is consistent with your desired legacy or your personal development affirmation and your highest good performed in the service of others. So we will cover those how to do it, not just say it, next week. And if you want to prepare, I would say, and if you want to get a head start, I would go to davidshaner.com, and on the home page, you'll see the cover of Living with the Wind at Your Back. Click on it, and you'll see a place where you can download for free what are called the 7 Arts cards. It's a one-page summary of each of the 14 exercises, and I'm going to use that actual document next week and talk to you about the exercises and the indebtedness to Saikontan, even in those exercises and in the description. So that's how thorough this book has at least penetrated my thinking, but I think also Toi Sensei's thinking. So I've now almost used 45 minutes, and so we do have time for questions if there are any. I want to thank you for your attention and your time. You've challenged me. The fact that you've wanted to know this personal account and you're reinforcing it with your emails, I'm just really, really grateful that you're all interested, because, you know, this is what's made me tick. And so for you to show interest, you know, is flattering to me. And I want to share what I can and always express my gratitude that Toi Sensei would share his life with me, specifically with respect to Saikontan, which was a love of this work that we shared starting in the fall of 1976. And then that was 27 years before he said, please come to Japan. I'm doing this Shokushu rewrite. And then it continued. So I very much appreciate everything. Rich, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sensei. Yeah, there's a question. George, if you're able to unmute your mic, please go ahead and you can state your question.
Hi, Sensei.
That's not George. That's Andrew.
So I'm curious, because I have read the book several times, Saikontan, and are these a little bit doctored epigrams that you've put up that are a little, maybe you've made it a little more clear?
No.
Better translation?
No, have you heard all these sessions?
Yes.
Yeah, so I talked about the various translations, and I shared with you that I was using 3 different translations for these presentations, and that there are many, many more translations. And I shared with you the one that I liked the best, as opposed to the one that I think most people ordered, the one from Wilson that has a great introductory essay.
Right.
It's my least favorite. So I'm not doctoring anything. I'm pulling from actual translations, and the one that I pulled from today is my favorite one. Where's
the green book?
Yeah. So this is, and this one is not all 300 and some epigrams, but it is by far more consistent with, well, it's the one, because it was done in 59 and I had it, this was the one that when I was, working with Toi Sensei, this is the one that I always used. And by the way, if you, I was just talking to Mayumi, or emailing with Mayumi, there's a zillion versions in Japanese because it was really, really popular in Japan. And oh, by the way, in Taiwan, I don't know if you know that Taipei has a very significant Japanese community, especially post-war. Anyway, there's lots of versions.
Yes. Well, for some reason, when you put it up there and we go over it, all of a sudden it becomes more clear.
Well, I think that once you have in your head a real clear image of what's third order, what's second order, and what's first order, it makes it very clear. As I said, once I was explaining to Tohei Sensei when I was at Uchideshi about phenomenology, and that it's always analyzing experience, knowing that experience is always directed, it's intentional. Tohei Sensei said, oh yeah, absolutely. So he got that like immediately. And so these lines basically depicted various levels of intentionality, complex, singular, and no intentions at all. It couldn't be more simple. And because it's so radically simple, like eat less, exercise more, buy low, sell high, profit is revenue less cost, it's like so basic, it really helps as a template to navigate through this very clear poetry, these epigrams in Saikontan. And as I said, that was like training wheels for me, because translating Shobogenzo or Fukan Zazengi or these other texts from Dogen and Kukai were way more difficult. But once I had a template that I could kind of help navigate the experiential side. So that first book, The Body-Mind Experience in Japanese Buddhism, was about theory and practice. So that's why this template was really good, because then I could analyze the practice of Zazen or the practice of meditation using mandalas, mudras, mantras. And Toi Sensei kind of supervised the whole thing, at least until I went off to Harvard and actually sat down by myself to write it all up, which was my dissertation.
Thank you, Sensei. I feel like now I know how to read it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's a great text. It's like a love affair with a book. It's kind of strange.
Thank you, George's iPad. I appreciate you. Sensei, another question from Matt Deutsche Kidder. Matt, if you want to unmute.
Hello, Sensei. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Matt. How you doing, bud?
Doing pretty well. Thank you.
Great.
So it's a similar question to Andrew's, where in the course of this, have purchased 3 translations of the book. And so one of the things I find useful when reading in translation is looking at different translations and kind of triangulating and correlating.
Yeah.
I've noticed that with the Chinese Garden of Serenity, none of the epigrams are numbered. Like
right.
When I look at Wilson's, it's like book 1, epigram 32.
Right.
When I look at the other one
right.
from Robert Aitken, it's
right.
similar. Like,
right.
Is there any correlation, or are the ones in the Chinese Garden of Serenity kind of in a random order?
Yeah, they're random. They're just chosen by the author.
Okay.
But here's another thing, and thank you for the question, Matthew, because it gives me an opportunity to say this again. I'm not even recommending that you go off and study Saikontan, unless you're interested in just the literature. What I'm doing is giving you a personal insight into the person Koichi Tohei. What I would recommend reading is Toi Sensei's writings. What I would recommend reading and working on is just what Toi Sensei is teaching us. I'm just saying that that's why I labeled these. This is just a personal journey. I'm not giving you, hey, if you do this, your training will be better. It might be that you'll gain a better understanding of things that may have been abstract, like relative thinking and absolute thinking, or things like Fudoshin or even living calmness or any of the Shokushu, the definition of ki, it might give you a richer understanding, because the thing that blew my mind is Toi Sensei's beginner's mind. I went there thinking, okay, we're going to try to improve upon the translation that the student in the Gakuen was doing. And we started with a blank sheet of paper, which I thought was like totally flattering. Like Toi Sensei just said, okay, what are we trying to communicate here? It wasn't like, this is what I said in 1974 when I wrote the Shokushu. He was willing to throw the whole thing away and do a new version, even in Japanese. But I'll tell you, as soon as he got feedback that said, oh, whoa, this is really different, we don't get it, like immediately Toi Sensei felt, you know what, I do not want to ruffle anyone's feathers and confuse people. So, and Shinichi Sensei wrote me a long letter and explained exactly what the feedback was and why Toi Sensei had decided, let's just leave everything the way it is. I went there confidentially and privately anyway. And all he did is changed a couple of very few things that were really to be politically correct. And he added the Shokushu, the treasure of ki testing. And I can say the word treasure is right out of Saikontan. It's standing at the gate, not recognizing the treasure. But I'll add one more thing. The other reason why it's a treasure for Tohei Sensei is ki testing is the glue for how to do it, not just say it. Because in ki testing, we have rational, empirical, publicly verifiable, repeatable ways, scientific ways, basically, to teach people, to help them to experientially understand the difference, right? Noticing the difference. We've had 3 of these Zoom calls on noticing the difference, right? And applying it in ki in daily life. That's exactly the book I'm asking you all to write. So Patrick Terry, noticing the difference with my family at home. So he gave us a Zoom call on that. Ileana, noticing the difference in how I apply myself as a musician and as a live performer. Rich, noticing the difference in daily life, how I can better serve in Otomo, my father. My challenge to everyone when I wrote Living with the Wind at Your Back is to say, write your own book, notice the difference, understand the gift that the universe has given you. If you have the breath of life in you right now, you have a 1. And with effort, with discipline, you can develop the self-control. And so what I tried to do is not just write a personal version of ki in daily life, but to write it with exercises so that people could do it, not just say it. And the exercises would be exercises you can apply in daily life because they're based on interactions that you have every day with the people around you. So it's not like do an exercise and, you know, it's like Shomanuchi Ikyowaza, which is great. But what I was trying to do in Living with the Wind at Your Back with these exercises was to say, you know what, this stuff works. I'm going to give you personal testimony. I've been applying it my whole life. And actually, I wrote 2 books that year because as soon as I came up with this model of the 7 arts, it hit me. I finished this book. My goal was to finish writing the first version of it, the first draft, before I turned 50. That was 16 years ago. So I finished it on May 20th, the day before I turned 50. And I still had time from my time off Furman, and it hit me that, whoa, these same 7 arts is exactly what I've been doing as a business consulting all these years. So I just said, you know what, before I go back to Furman, I gotta knock out the second book right away. And that's the 7 Arts of Change, which is about business transformation. So I might be a walking testimonial, but this works. I've applied it. Tohei Sensei inspired me in 2003 with this whole Shokushu visit. I wrote the book and gave it to him. And fortunately, he said, good job. Yeah, go ahead, publish.
Thank you, Sensei. That is the end of the questions. So I think
Okay.
we are in a position we can wrap up.
If you want to get a sneak peek ahead and maybe have it available with you next week, it's free. Just go to davidshaner.com, click on the book. It's a book order page. You don't have to order it if you don't want to. But what you can do is get the exercises, the summary sheet. So there's 14 pages, one for each, and it might help you to actually go over it and become familiar with it before next week's class. Because it's all about you have to be able to do it, not just say it, I wanted to kind of convert next week's 4th session. I thought it would be, based on your questions, more consistent to take a deeper dive into the actual exercises and show relationships with Saikontan, or clearly Toi Sensei's thinking in each one. And I'm looking forward to doing that. If you have feedback for me, I've said again and again and again, it feeds me, it energizes me. Don't be shy. I'm sheltered in place too, right? So getting your email is a pleasure. So please continue to share your thoughts and your reflections, and I appreciate it very much. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you
I'm
very
flattered.
much, Sensei.
Be safe, and
Bye-bye.
prayers to all those fellow human beings that we have lost and their families. So thank you.
Thank you, Sensei.